I am so woefully unprepared, and it's a little bit.
We're always woefully unprepared, Shannon.
I mean, but at least I know what we're talking about.
Well, we have a starting point that might be good enough, honestly. Many days it is on it. Many days it is. Because the worst shows we've ever had, I think we've never had a starting point and it just doesn't go anywhere.
Hmm.
But at least when we have a topic to open with, it, you know, usually goes a
Okay,
little bit better.
I'll let you do the intro.
So, hello, and welcome to Nerd Rage, episode 187. Um, it's been a.
Are we not going to quibble about the number this time?
No, we're not, because I'm actually 100% confident on that one for once. But, um, but thanks for bringing it up and keeping our record strong. Anyway, but yeah, so it's another week. It's another Nerd Rage. A lot of things have happened. There's a lot of things to talk about. And I think the first thing to talk about actually is just a few hours ago, before we started recording. John McCain's family announced that he's actually stopping the treatments for his brain tumor because it doesn't seem that the treatments are doing enough to combat the cancer. So they've just, kind of accepted.
Right. Likely just quality of life issue at this point.
Right. And I'll say this much honestly. When it comes to John McCain, I really don't like the man all that much.
Right.
He's proven over the years that he's kind of an asshat. But on the other hand, I don't wish cancer on anyone. Given that the past year or so, actually it's not even a year or so, it's just been a year, not even quite a year yet, has been dominated by cancer in my own family with my father and his cancer. It's I'll tell you right now. I don't feel like I've experienced nearly as much stress or heartache as a lot of people who do have to deal with cancer in the family. At the same time, I feel for a lot of people who do. Like, it's kind of weird realizing that I can now fully understand where what a lot of people have to deal with. I even have a couple of coworkers who are dealing with cancer at the moment in their own families as well, and it's kind of crazy. In fact, one of the coworkers, her father, has the exact same kind of cancer my father has. Um, so that's kind of just, it's a little nuts, but yeah, it's like I don't wish, but I don't, it's like at the same time I may not like John McCain, but I don't wish ill on him, and it's kind of a shame almost to see, someone who, for all of his faults, at the same time has, been such a staple of American political life for decades now, kind of being taken down by something so, what's the word I'm looking for?
Mm, I don't know. It's almost.
Virulent, maybe? But, it's not quite the right word, but it kind of gets the point across. Point remains that, yeah, it's still hard news to hear, you know?
Yeah. And I think, especially because we see so much vitriol in political discourse and debate. Um, I may not like John McCain, and I may really not like him as a politician. Um, but like you said, I don't wish anything horrible on him. I don't wish cancer on him, and it would be lovely if he could have been treated and come out of it and had more time with his family, and
Mm-hmm.
not had to make this call that he would stop treatment, because that's essentially, just it's saying that there's no hope.
Yep.
Um, I think that's horrible for his family, to have to accept that. And, you know, but like I was saying, it's just, we forget in our political back and forth online, especially, that we're still talking about human beings, and, that they still do have families and people love them. And, we may think that they are just absolutely atrocious politicians, that their policies are harmful and all of this sort of thing. But they still care about people. There are people in their lives that they do actually care about.
Right.
Um,
And I really don't think that like John McCain is like a dishonorable man or anything. You know, that's the other thing. I may dislike a lot of the things he says, a lot of things he believes about people like us, who happen to be farther to the right than he is. But
right,
at the same time, I don't get the overriding sense that he's like a particularly mean or spiteful sort of person. I don't. Because sometimes people do that. Sometimes people will act in that way, but because again, human nature is complex.
right. I
Sometimes
do think that there are politicians who are mean and spiteful,
Nancy Pelosi.
definitely. And I would have much less regard for them than I
Mm-hmm.
do McCain. Um, I still wouldn't wish that their families would watch them suffer and die.
Yeah. Yeah, Money. I honestly can't say it. I'll be honest. I can't honestly think of a single person in America that I would wish to see suffer and die like that. Just because that's not something you should be wishing for in the first place. I mean, even awful people like they certainly should be punished, and they are certainly they're certainly barreling at full speed towards their eternal punishment. But do I actually wish ill on them though? That's a different story.
Right. And, I think the absolute most horrible human being, like just the worst person that I can imagine, is someone that would abuse a child. Um, and, there are things that I have read and heard about that I wish I could purge from memory. Um, People that rape children and traffic them and,
Mm-hmm.
just record just horrible things that they do to them. And then the people that watch that they consume that as if it's, something that they enjoy. Those people, I don't think they should have another day on this earth to breathe, but I don't want to torture them first. I
Mm-hmm.
just want them dead. I want them gone. I want, whatever children who may still be living that they tortured and hurt, that they would never have to worry about that person living in the same space with them again.
Right.
Um, yeah,
Incidentally, that does remind me that I do want to eventually one day do an episode on that sort of thing, on the whole concept of human trafficking and child, sexual slavery and all that sort of thing. Um, just because I think it's actually a really really big deal that almost no one really talks about in a meaningful way,
right.
and no one takes seriously. Doubly so because of like our porn culture. Um,
I think people are willfully ignorant about it. They've got their heads in the sand because it's an unpleasant thing to face.
well, I think it's also a matter of I don't think we really. I think that we don't quite even get the scope of it. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
like I
it's a
know,
huge
like even now,
problem.
I don't think I fathom the scope of how how big this is. But it feels like almost every week these days, like I'm seeing someone share a story somewhere of like a child sex ring being broken up in some state in the United States, not even anywhere else
Right.
in the United States. You know.
Well, I had shared something. It's been a while back, and it was basically a list of hundreds in higher education that
Oh yeah. Oh
had,
crap! I forgot about
yeah.
that. I've totally
um,
forgot about that.
that's a bit concerning,
Or say
the
in
people who are,
no, go on.
oh, just, those who are shaping the thoughts and perceptions of, those who are going into adulthood to take on leadership roles, and just how rampant it is among that group.
Right.
That's that should concern everyone. It really should.
And you were talking about the whole heads in the sand thing, and it just reminded me of the grooming gangs over in the UK. You know, of these
Hmm.
communities of Asian men. Um, because I'm sure there's definitely no ethnic or religious commonality between these Asian men. You know, I'm sure that
Yeah.
I'm sure that they are mostly comprised of Chinese and Koreans with a few Singaporean
You know,
individuals mixed in the
it's
mix.
strange, but I've never seen what you would consider a typical Asian name associated with any of them. It's all been rather more,
To the west of Asia, the western part of Asia,
yeah,
or the northern part of
the
Africa.
western reaches of Asia.
Yeah, or the northern parts of Africa. You know, it's a. But yes, but no, but that's definitely a case of heads buried in the sand where they completely ignore the fact that thousands of young girls have been abused in England for like for the past 2 or 3 decades, and like it's absolutely insane to me the idea that anyone would ignore that. But
Yeah, it really is. I mean, thousands of your children.
I really think we actually should and that's why I kind of want to do a special episode on that, just because I also want to do the research on it because I actually want to be informed as humanly possible and be able to share as much information as humanly possible when we do it. Because
Hmm. Well, I read something earlier today about how young women who leave reservations in the United States, especially around the Great Lakes region,
mm-hmm.
they go missing,
Mm.
and that it's almost as if no one even notices because I don't know, it's a demographic that I think is sort of ripe to be taken and exploited.
Native Americans are basically the demographic no one ever thinks about.
Yeah.
Even in the age of the internet, and you occasionally have it cropping up, it's like no one ever thinks about Native Americans besides those very specific moments, like where say like Indian mascots, and for sports teams suddenly become a big problem. But it's like, what about? It's like, really, that's your biggest concern? What about all the other problems these communities are suffering from?
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know if you were trying to lead into a topic on cultural appropriation,
Oh gosh, I
but
wasn't, but there we are.
it's funny though. You have a lot of white people that get offended on behalf of natives about something like the Washington Redskins and
Hmm.
their mascot. Um,
Or how
and
my own
oh,
university's Warriors, their mascot was originally like an Indian brave, and they turned into some dumb
yeah.
cartoony, Roman centurion bear thing, and it's just like, okay, sure, I guess we're five now.
But I mean, it it reminds me. There was something that I saw a few days ago. And it was this guy, it was a black guy, and he was talking about wearing a shirt that had Caucasians and a white guy. And he'd walked around somewhere in New York. And I don't really know what the person who shared the video was trying to get at. It was several minutes long,
Mm-hmm.
and he was talking about just how people were so offended, and he got all kinds of hate mail and death threats, and um, I was like, okay. I think Washington Post wrote they had a column about his experience,
Mm-hmm.
but not once was there proof. There was never any verifiable proof that he got death threats. And I thought it was funny that he was walking around New York that's full of liberals and claims that he got all kinds of comments about, how his shirt was horrible or something because it said Caucasian.
I don't know what to tell you on that.
But it's funny because you think about there. It's not just it's not just one demographic that has something sort of appropriated and used in that manner.
Mm-hmm.
What about the Fighting Irish? That's a stereotype of white people.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the Vikings. You've got
And yes, the
rebels.
Irish, they don't even consider themselves white. That's a hilarious part.
It's just it's okay to take some things but not others or whatever. And I love how white people are constantly getting offended on behalf of other groups because of white guilt or something. Which I wasn't that something. Was it in the Post or the Times about white guilt? Oh, I'd have to look it up. But anyways,
Probably both, but actually, if you really think about it, this whole concept of whiteness and everything, really, this whole idea is almost unique to the Anglosphere. If you really think about it, like any sort of any area, any location that was like really touched by the English in any sort of way, that's really where it comes from, more so than any other region. Like you don't really hear people talk too much about whiteness when it comes to French people or even Scandinavian people or so forth. Like it doesn't feel like it has the same connotation as when you're talking about the United States or any sort of current British or former British territory. And it's funny because cultural appropriation is just the funniest Western conceit. This idea
yeah.
that taking aspects of people's culture that you like is somehow this awful, awful evil that must be stamped out. Like cultures
Yeah.
haven't done that, for the entirety of human history.
I mean, culture is all right. What is just so crazy to me is that sexuality can be a fluid concept, but culture cannot. I mean, what the crap?
Yeah,
And
I guess that's
I
right.
do
Hey.
sometimes say, tongue in cheek, when it comes to, white people being seen as sort of like this homogenous demographic. And I'm like, there are many different kinds of white people. Why do we just all look the same to you? I mean,
Mm-hmm. Oh, I mean, that's the huge problem. I mean, that is fundamentally a huge problem, though, isn't it? Like this whole is just this also another annoying Western conceit is to treat groups of people as though they're just a monolith, just based on one character
right.
trait, and it's just like, but they're not.
Well, I told someone earlier I would probably have uh, much more in common with a black person that was raised in a rural area than I would with a white person who was raised in a city.
Right.
I mean, just all other things considered, that would probably shape our perceptions more.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. And Ruth and I were talking a couple weeks ago about this issue of cultural appropriation. And she was saying, this is why everyone is so depressed and anxious and just, tired all the time, that we're just completely exhausted because we're walking on eggshells
Yeah.
all day, because we might offend someone. And we talked about there was she brought up there was something that she had seen or heard about how it's cultural appropriation when white women shave their eyebrows and draw them on because and I'm like, are you serious? That's as
Okay.
dumb as hoop earrings being cultural appropriation. Okay, you remember when hoop earrings
Yes, I
were
remember.
somehow, stolen by the whites from like Latinas or black people or whatever. I don't know. Like we keep taking things from black and brown people that never actually originated with black and brown people. I don't, it's just weird.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but she was talking about, like the old Hollywood starlets would do that, and
Right.
they were all white. But now it's associated with, like the Chula look or whatever, and so it's called cultural appropriation when white people do that. And I'm thinking, I've got, I've got someone in my family with alopecia. She has to draw her eyebrows on because all her hair fell out. She's not trying to appropriate your culture, I promise. It's just crazy stuff like that. And Ruth was like, this is why you get on social media, just check stuff out, and then you're just anxious all day and you're exhausted all the time because somebody is offended about something stupid every second.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't really just live life. You can't just, not be aware or concerned because then you'll get piled on and it's like, oh, that's just your privilege.
Right.
It's crazy.
And that's what's made my Twitter so insufferable, honestly. Like the only reason I'm on it is just because there's occasionally interactions that I do appreciate. But just skimming through my timeline though is just so frustrating these days. Because it's filled to the brim with so many retweets of dumb retweets and likes, thanks Twitter, of dumb things that I
Right.
don't want to see at all, and it's just like, and it's like so many times it's just like I feel like this temptation to argue because it's like you don't even understand what conservatives believe on this, or you don't understand what Christians believe on
Right.
this, or you don't or like you're just clearly lumping in people together in a way that doesn't make any sense, or you're attacking a straw man when this is not what people are criticizing about The Last Jedi. But 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 it's stuff like that, and it's not just this Last Jedi specifically too, but it's like all sorts of things. Like a few weeks back when Thundercats Roar was all the outrage. People were attacking straw men about what people didn't like about the style of it, and
Right.
it's just like, you know,
Well, I mean, that's like something I saw earlier about it, like this push to name Black Panther as for an award,
oh
like
gosh,
the
yes, the best picture, wasn't it?
Best Picture. Yeah. And I was, a lot of people were like, "No, that's not even the best Marvel movie that's come out this year.
Mm-hmm.
Why would that be the nominee? Why is this one the one that people are going to get behind?"
I myself like mediocre trash.
And
It's not even trash. It's
oh
just
my gosh,
mediocre.
yeah, it's, and of course, the straw man is you're racist if you don't like Black Panther, which is dumb.
Mm-hmm.
And you could list every other movie with, a black cast or a black lead that you think is more deserving of, accolades or whatever. And it wouldn't matter. Nobody cares
Mm-hmm.
because they've got something to be offended about and that's what they're going to cling to.
Yep. That's where our internet discourse has evolved to in 2018.
And I mean, we are eat up with first world problems, are we not?
Oh
When we
yes.
can when we can get offended about shaved eyebrows and hoop earrings and which superhero movie is the greatest and
I kind
you
of
know
hope that EMP goes off eventually, just so that all these outrage mongers get eaten alive in a world where they can't actually fend for themselves. I mean, my goodness, I may not be the most prepared person on the face of the earth, but I'll bet you 100 to 1. I'll bet you, that 100 to 1. That doesn't make any sense. But I'll bet you that I probably managed to adapt somehow. Whereas all these
Yep.
people, like sitting alone in their parents' basements or in some tiny little single room apartment or wherever, where all they do is spend all their time on social media crying, complaining about the dumbest crap, will never possibly adapt to sudden
Well, they
collapse
would
of our
take to the
infrastructure.
streets to start complaining about dumb crap, and then they'd get dead,
They get dead.
and the rest of us would be happily, sort of tucked away in a safe place.
I'm not gonna lie. I'm actually afraid that like all this crap from Antifa to everyone else, is eventually going to actually lead to violence.
Well,
Um,
yeah. I mean, it's like I said in another thread on my wall, and I don't remember if you were following that one, but um,
I've seen most of them. It's just I don't
when
respond to all of
you
them.
when you frame everything that disagrees with your beliefs and everyone who disagrees with your beliefs as Nazi and fascist, and then your mantra is to punch Nazis,
Mm-hmm.
it is inherent that there's going to be some violence. I mean, it is a credible threat of violence to, pretty much define everything that you disagree with as Nazism and
Mm-hmm.
then to pound that drum that you're going to go punch Nazis.
Yep.
I mean,
And the worst part of it is, of course, that the other side is comprised entirely of, pink-haired psychos who are either stick figures or fatter than Jabba the Hutt. And it's just like, okay, who do you think is actually going to win in this confrontation? Like, the only reason they're emboldened is because, of course, the governing bodies of a lot of American cities just don't want to do anything about them. In fact, isn't,
oh, yeah. Well, I mean, the leaders of a lot of cities agree with them.
mm-hmm.
And
Though
so,
even even
they're
Portland's
perfectly
cracking
okay
down.
with intimidating opposition, and keeping them quiet and not letting them voice their opinions.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and see that's that's why they fight dirty.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's because they know that they can't win in an actual confrontation with someone where they're actually facing them one on one. So that's why they hide their face so that they can blend into the mob.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they throw things, and that's why, they sucker punch and, try every which way they can to hurt people, physically hurt them, um, and run away.
And I'll tell you right now, one of these days, one of these punks is going to pick a fight with the wrong person, and as they're swinging their bike lock, they're going to come face to face with 1911. And God help them if they do.
I mean, I hate the thought of that because I don't want guns and gun owners to be demonized any more than they already are. But at the same time,
That's
I
kind of the whole.
think,
That's
you
kind of
know,
the whole
we're,
point of it.
yeah, people are really getting fed up with being attacked, and, the government bodies that are presumably there to keep them safe are letting it happen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is why we have the Second Amendment, so that we can defend ourselves.
Speaking of getting fed up, incidentally, it kind of makes me think because remember how I want to talk about the Trump administration a little bit, but actually I want to talk first actually about the midterms, because of course all the rage at the beginning of the year was talking about this whole concept of a blue wave coming, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's
Um,
so frightening.
and I gotta be honest, it feels like the midterms are completely up in the air right now, contrary to what a lot of people seem to believe. I don't think there's a blue wave coming. I'm not sure there's a blue wave coming. Rather, I don't think there's a red wave or anything of that sort coming. But I'm not sure there's a blue wave coming either. Um, because I kind of wonder if that whole silent majority idea is kind of going to come into play again. This notion that there is a
Yeah.
silent majority of Americans who actually are kind of tired of all this crap, who are actually going to come out in force. Lots of polling kind of subtly suggest that maybe the Democrats don't look as strong in the coming midterms. But I just don't, I don't want to go out making predictions or anything. A, because I'm not a professional pollster, I'm not a professional reader of the numbers. The frick does that mean? But I don't do this sort of thing professionally or even on an amateur basis. It's just it's just a feeling that it's just I'm trying to suss out the sense and the feeling of the nation. Just based on observation.
Hmm.
And while the left is super animated about a lot of things, I just feel like there's like sort of like a simmering frustration on the part of the right and in the center. I think a lot of
Yeah.
centrists too are suffering from a lot of frustration too regarding how the left is behaving and how the left is embracing all of the craziness, from socialism to gender fluidity to everything in between. I think is actually frustrating a lot of people who do not even feel free to actually speak their minds about these things, lest they be branded, hateful bigots, and lose their
Yeah,
jobs.
true.
But I was
And
wondering what your
and
take on it
in
was.
part, it's that branding and
Excuse me.
throwing out slurs left and right that's sort of feeding the discontent amongst your centrist um and independents.
Oh yeah, there was that big hashtag like a month ago or so. With like liberals talking about why they're leaving the left or leaving the Democrats at least.
Yep. And then they were all called Russian bots.
Yep, because I'm sure that's going to bring everybody back to their side.
Yeah.
There's
Real
one.
people would never leave us.
Mhm. I mean, there's one person I follow on Twitter, Grums. He's Mark Curran. He's a former developer from Blizzard. I think he worked on World of Warcraft. Um, I feel like he worked on something else. He doesn't work at Blizzard anymore, but he's a former developer, and I think he's also working on some sort of private World of Warcraft related project. But but he had a thread like maybe 2 or 3 months ago where he basically spelled out. I think I shared it in fact on Facebook, but where it basically spelled out what the Democrats have to do in order to bring people like him back, because he's very clearly a liberal, but he voted for Trump. Um, and his mentions were, after he made this thread, his mentions were just absolutely flooded with a bunch of resistance crazies, basically, who basically were proving his point about why he voted for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Um, I just think I think that's very telling, because I feel like the left is getting super insulated compared to anything we've seen before. I feel like the left is super insulated against any sort of outside ideas in a way that they weren't even during the Obama administration. The Obama administration, they were already hardening, but hardening their hearts against outside influences. But it feels like almost like they're like this super dense, like nugget of not uranium compared to all outside influences, and it's just
Hmm.
it feels like they themselves may not realize like just how far they've actually slipped in that
Yeah.
way. It's like not even like not even it's like not even a matter of like they know and they don't care. Some of them do, of course, but I think for a lot of them, they flat out just do not realize how far down the rabbit hole they've fallen.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I'm creating and using all sorts of metaphors right now. There's just a nugget of uranium 238 falling down the rabbit hole to Wonderland. But
Hashtag rabbit terrorist.
oh gosh, I'm late for a very important date with my 72 virgins. But
Oh my gosh.
you're seeing him with the bomb vest, right? Hopping around. Anyway,
Here comes Peter Cottontail.
hippity hoppity.
Jihad's on its way.
Like, okay, I couldn't think of the line, but you got it. Good job. I'm proud of you. I'm like, okay, how can I turn this into something terrorist related? But I couldn't think of something, and there you are, just supporting me right out of there. Okay, anyway.
Oh yeah. I'm always down for some craziness.
I'm always down for some jihad. Watch as this video gets blocked for me saying
Silence!
that.
I kill you.
It's like, just watch as this video gets blocked for me saying that.
There we go. We're gonna be off the YouTube.
FBI
Gosh,
agents knock on my door. So we're a little concerned here. Did you watch the rest of the video? I mean, I can believe it. I can believe it. The deep state's completely out of control right now. So, but anyway, speaking of the
Speaking
deep
of
state.
being insulated
Oh,
against
okay.
all outside influence, um, Hollywood, and really I guess there's a correlation because, leftists really do kind of look to Hollywood for a lot of their influence. But
Yeah, they're cues.
yeah, Hollywood is so insulated, and they have not given up on rebooting all the things.
Yes.
Did you did you see that ABC is going to reboot Bewitched?
Yep. I mean, it's not even the worst premise in the world, truth be told. But it's one of those things where it's like, if we weren't so utterly inundated with woke reboots right now,
Yeah.
it's just like this is just boring and annoying at this point. It's like
Yep.
just stop, just stop. Make your own property. You make a story about a. Don't remake Bewitched. Make your own story about a black single mom who happens to be, a witch or something along those lines. Don't.
It really is such a I mean, where is the creativity? And I have to wonder, I mean, just kind of going off on a tangent here.
Uh oh.
We've discussed before how we are created in the image of the creator. And so we all have like this need to create
Yeah.
and to make things and to make beautiful things, and whether it's paintings or photography or music or you know whatever, molding something with our hands. It's everyone has within them this sort of drive to create something beautiful.
Yes.
And so we've talked about, being made in the image of the grand creator. And since Hollywood's lack of creativity has been sort of an ongoing topic, I wonder if the more that you separate yourself from the creator, the less you can actually create yourself.
I can guarantee that it's actually true. Because I mean, that's the thing. If you really think about it, that's the same problem that Satan suffers from, isn't it? Satan can't create himself. He can only create mockeries and he can only
He can't
destroy.
create. He can
He can
pervert
he can
creation
pervert
or something.
creations. I mean, that's yeah, I phrased that wrong. Sorry. He can pervert things and he can take that which already exists and turn it into something less than it was. Whereas people whose minds and their focus and their soul is focused on the actual creator, on God, will create beautiful things. They'll create beautiful sculptures. They'll create beautiful paintings. They'll create amazing music. And you can see that this kind of like bleeds over into people whose focus may not be so much on God, but if they live in a culture where God is heavily focused on, then even if they themselves are like atheistic or whatever, they themselves may still end up creating great things because the full culture is focused on creating great things.
And you do see sometimes in the sort of being in awe of the creation itself, that can lead to a creative bent, and people who may not actually focus on the creator.
Right.
But then you see something that God created to be, beautiful and fulfilling, say, for instance, sex, and how that's perverted into all kinds of craziness,
Right.
and it just becomes like, an empty sort of soul drain
Mm-hmm.
for people that are constantly chasing something that they can't ever find.
And if you look back, especially to the history of the latter half of the 20th century and into the 21st, you can see where that slow decline comes from. Where we have
Hmm.
we have this ideal and it's functionally the societal norm. I mean, everybody screws up, of course, but it's functionally the societal norm for centuries, essentially. And as soon as that norm is altered, for example, suddenly we've normalized the concept of sex outside of marriage. And whatever you may feel about that, at the end of the day, because our ultimate ideal was to kind of save it for that, or at the very least for our,
A
for
meaningful.
our meaningful relationships. Yes, if we're saving it for those meaningful relationships, for our marriages and so forth, as soon as we divorced it from that, you can see how like human sexuality and the quality of human sexuality and the health of human sexuality has
Right.
declined until this point today, where now suddenly there are people out there trying to normalize pedophilia.
Hmm. I mean,
And
it's really when we cease to behave as if we are more than just the body.
mm-hmm,
We're more than just base animal instincts. um, when we sort of lose sight of the fact that there's um, a really deep, complex human person with a soul and a personality and with emotions, and it's all tied together in this one package.
right.
Um, yeah, so that's my theory on why Hollywood can't create anything anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They're just taking stuff like Buffy and they're gonna reboot it with, a black Buffy.
Yeah, and it's just like, but
um,
that's not creative. That's not original. That's not inventive. Or taking the
you
cast of
know,
Ghostbusters and making it all female.
yeah, they're taking stuff and then changing it in the most shallow ways, and then trying to throw in something sort of edgy that they think is culturally relevant.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just falling flat every time because there is not enough there really to entertain people, even people who have no interest or perception of the spiritual. It's unfulfilling. It's the same way that I said sex has sort of devolved over the years. It's unfulfilling
Mm-hmm.
because it there's we've lost sight of the purpose and the creative input. And honestly, I mean, it's really strange. But if people if people nowadays almost despise everything about sex as procreation.
Mm-hmm.
Cis norm, heteronormative couples
Bless you.
and actually just having babies,
Yeah.
babies themselves. They seem to think that they're just horrible little meat slugs that are inferior to a puppy.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the Bible tells us that people will be without natural affection,
Yep.
and that's one of the major places where we see it is in the relationship of men and women to each other and women to children.
Yep. It's it's a thing, all
It's disturbing.
right. I mean, it's also saddening too because it's like because it feels also for people like us where it feels like it's like our island is slowly shrinking, rather than being the great expanse of the world. We actually feel like we're a shrinking island of people who actually value these sorts of quality things, these sorts of uplifting things, these sorts of great things. I'll tell you right
Right.
now, I don't think there's ever going to be, I don't think there's ever going to ever get, at the rate we're going anyway, I don't think there's ever going to be another author like, say, J.R.R. Tolkien, making
Right. They
making a
can create an
great
entire world with a history and just
and
really rich
languages.
development and languages and
Right. Incidentally, I feel like Frank Herbert in that way is like an example of what I was saying about how it kind of spreads out to like people who are not overtly religious, because Herbert was an atheist, but he created something that was so rich and interesting in Dune. Um,
Mhm.
and it's like I don't think we're really gonna ever see like another proper Frank Herbert. In fact, I'll tell you something that's a good example of decline. Terry Brooks and his Shannara series. If like the Shannara series has been steadily declining as he's written more series over the years. Starting in I think 1978 or something when the Sword of Shannara was first published, and it's this rich new fantasy world. It copies a little bit from the Lord of the Rings, but then it becomes its own thing in its next book, The Elfstones of Shannara, and it's just great for like 3 or 4 or 6 trilogies after that, and then like in the like maybe the past 2 or 3 series, it doesn't feel as rich or as interesting anymore. I still enjoy it, but it's not
Hmm.
there anymore.
Right.
Or should I say like Comicsgate or something? The decline of like like the Marvel comics and everything doing the whole SJW thing, and you just see this precipitous decline in the quality of what it is. Or hell, this whole
Yeah.
Star Wars debate. Say what you will about the prequels, but at least there was like a grand vision there. There was a grand creative
Yeah.
quest there.
There was a theme. There was a theme that was identifiable,
Yeah,
and
and this
and
new
now
in this new trilogy,
there's nothing. It's just chaos.
even if you like the movies, and I certainly enjoyed The Force Awakens, it's like it doesn't have the same pull to it, and it seems to spread out all across society. You can see it everywhere, and
Hmm.
it's kind of hard to watch, honestly.
It really is. And
Excuse me.
not just as a Christian, but as someone who appreciates creativity.
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult to watch that stagnate and really begin to just disappear from culture.
Yeah.
Did you want to talk about the post that you wrote about Star Wars and the themes there?
Oh yeah. Um, so the other day, well, probably days ago, really, I wrote it. Then I published it like 4 days after I finished writing it. But I wrote a post on our blog because we still have a blog, believe it or not, fullfrontalnerdery.net. Haven't had nothing's been posted there since April 1st. I posted something on Easter, but I wrote a thing called Harmony and Free Will, because the other day I was thinking about the idea of what balance in the Force means in Star Wars.
Hmm.
Because I remember that was a question that always used to confuse me. Of course, people figured this out long before I did, but I never really found that sort of thing. I just remember for years I could not figure out what the whole chosen one prophecy meant. I could not figure out, what it meant, that Anakin would bring balance to the Force, because I always thought of balance being like a balance between light and dark.
Hmm. The yin and yang.
Yeah, but it didn't occur to me that that's not what balance means. Not in Star Wars, anyway. I don't think that's what balance means in the real world either, because what balance really means is harmony. It means that everything is working basically as it should. Without any sort of outside interference. So the life cycle moves as it does, the sun rises and sets as it does, etc., etc. There's harmony in the universe, though. Nothing is disrupting that. There's nothing that's causing great strife and great terror. Like things will live, things will be born, things will die, and it is as it should be. Um, and I got into a whole post basically about how the whole chosen one prophecy basically means that Anakin's going to destroy the Sith because the Sith are in opposition to harmony. Um, and then I kind of related it actually to the character of Rey in The Last Jedi. Um, and I don't really want to super get into. I don't really want to get into the weeds into it. In no small part because some of it does kind of rely on some inferences that I'm not even sure I believe are totally, or at least intentional. I think they might be unintentional. But it's basically this idea that Snoke mentions in the movie that Rey is like this light side force that is rising up in opposition to Kylo Ren's darkness. And I feel like and I felt like that was almost antithetical to the whole idea of Star Wars in a lot of ways. Um, because the whole notion based on the assumption of a balance between light and dark. That if there's great darkness, therefore there must be great light to oppose it. And it felt like it took away from the whole what? The whole notion, not nonsense, the whole notion. That was weird. The whole notion of like free will in Star Wars.
Hmm.
Um, because it feels like Rey doesn't have free will. Because if you remember in the Star Wars video, and in I think I think I linked to it in the article, but in the second episode of my Last Jedi rant, I talked about how in two occasions it feels like Rey should, or at least it would be very logical for Rey to make very different decisions than she does in the Last Jedi. And it almost feels like she
Right.
doesn't have like the free will to do that. Almost like
We
because she's
touched
supposed to
on
be the
that
light.
in our Star Wars debate,
Yeah.
um, about how she, we kind of wish that she had struggled more
Mm-hmm.
with her choices, but they seemed almost to be made for her.
Yeah. And that's what I talk about. And it's like this, and because the thing is that this is really hard to explain, really, because it's like without like going through the entire article in my head, and it's getting confusing. But the thing is that basically, when harmony is maintained in the universe of Star Wars, it's all because of the actions of individuals. Individuals make their choices freely to either maintain or disrupt harmony. So Palpatine made the choice to disrupt harmony. Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda made the choice to maintain harmony. Anakin ultimately made the choice to disrupt harmony by pursuing his own selfish goals.
Hmm.
Whereas Luke made the intentional choice to pursue harmony in his choices. And you can go all throughout the history of Star Wars and Legends too, where you just find stories of people making the intentional choice to either do the right or the wrong thing.
Right.
And it doesn't feel like Rey has the freedom to make those choices. It doesn't feel like it feels like basically she's like an agent. She's an agent of the Force to be the light side, rather than a free actor who's choosing to be. The hell did I just do? Sorry, I made that motion and I saw myself and it confused me because I like shook violently. And I'm just like, what am I do? What am I doing right now? But but
Yeah,
she doesn't go on.
she's essentially more or less just what the Force is focused through, almost. And
Yeah.
it would be nice to see her as a character have more autonomy,
Mm-hmm.
um, and to actually struggle with her choices and to struggle with her destiny. If it is her destiny,
Mm-hmm.
she still at least needs to struggle with that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Has to come to terms with it, because
that's like every great epic, adventure ever, where you're sort of, um, whoever it is that's on this quest that has this destiny that's supposed to do these great things, they still struggle with it.
yeah, and they still
Um,
choose to pursue it. A lot of a
right,
lot of those a lot of
and
those
that
stories.
it sort of, it's kind of the chicken and egg question of, sci-fi and fantasy. Is, were they chosen for this quest because they were a hero, or did the quest shape them into a hero because they chose, they made the hard choices along the way?
Right. And a lot of great stories, will answer that, will actually ask those questions and show the hero
Hmm.
trying to come to terms with who they are, who they have become, where they have come from.
Right. Because it seems like it seems sort of universal in all of these stories that every time they reach a point where they ask themselves, or someone else will pose the question for them, whether or not they're going to continue.
Mm-hmm.
In Lord of the Rings, Galadriel sort of filled that role where, she made it very clear what they were leaving behind
Mm-hmm.
and what they were going towards, and gave them that choice.
Yeah, and she
Um,
did it, and she did it at a very interesting moment too, right after they lost Gandalf. Um,
right.
if you really think about it, that's how important that moment is. Where it's like, is this a quest you want to continue on because you will experience much hardship along the way?
Hmm.
You've already
Yeah.
experienced great
And that's
hardship
why
too.
I really think that Samwise is the hero of that story.
Mm-hmm.
um, because he had the simplest, really the most simple desires from life, and he would have lost everything.
Yep.
um, and he really had to answer the question of, is it worth it, multiple times throughout that journey.
Mm-hmm.
And every single time he decided it was worth it.
Yep. But you could also see that in the journey of the other characters too. You could see the growth in
Yeah.
Mary and
I
Pippin.
think, Aragorn's, for him, the quest meant much more.
Mm-hmm.
It's Aragorn and Samwise are almost like mirrors of each other. It's just that Aragorn was.
Aragorn was much tougher, and like, they had the experience
I
for
mean,
it.
as
And
far as character, just,
yeah,
like, um,
I know what you're trying to
sort
say
of,
though,
right.
because they had this because they had the same
Not
sort
that,
of,
I mean, they're very different
but
people, but
they had the same kind of drive and determination that was pushing them
yes,
on,
yes, they're
because
the same sort of hero inside, I think.
they were
Um,
both fighting for something greater than themselves, and yet
yes.
fighting for things that were so different from each other. Because Samwise was fighting
and
for a
yet and
simple
yet
life in the
so
Shire.
intensely personal too, because
Yeah.
Aragorn's, he's fighting for just almost to be worthy of Arwen.
Mm-hmm.
All of the elves were leaving, and she was willing to give up her immortality and, sort of like the paradise of Valinor,
Yeah.
to be his queen.
And
But
not
then he has to be worthy.
Yeah, and it's not just that, but it's also Aragorn's also fighting for Gondor, and he's fighting also for the legacy of Numenor. If you really think about it, on the
Oh
deepest
yeah,
level, he's fighting for this ancient, 4,000-year-old legacy.
right.
Actually, longer than
And
4,000. It's probably more like 6,000 years. But
and knowing that Gondor still stands, and that, they've held out for thousands of years this hope that the king would return.
hmm
I mean, he would not only be letting himself down, he would be letting the world down in
yeah, because
terms
I
of
think
leaving it to, the Dark Lord. But he would be letting down, this race of people that had never given up hope, and, this immortal elf princess that was willing to
hmm
essentially die to be with him.
yes. And then, of course, you compare that to Samwise's journey, and it's so different, and yet it's so alike, because Samwise is
Everything that
likewise.
Samwise loved was on the line, because the vision that he was given of the Shire being, defiled and destroyed, and the people that he loved being, put out of their homes, and I mean, to him, that was just, that was the absolute destruction of everything that he knew.
hmm And it's really funny because it goes back again to us talking about beauty and creating wonderful things, and it's amazing how like you can delve into it and see how these two seemingly completely disparate things actually relate to each other in such an intricate way.
Right.
And that's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's wonderful
It
and
is.
amazing.
And to take it a step further, in terms of harmony, um, just in the beginning of the Silmarillion, in the sort of creation song
The
of
Song of the
Middle Earth.
Aina.
Yes, and just the way that it's all shaped and formed, and it's so great. Like, just the scope of it is amazing.
And here comes
C.S.
Melkor!
Lewis, C.S. Lewis kind of went there in The Magician's Nephew, in the creation of Narnia,
hmm
when Aslan sung the land into being and all the animals.
hmm
Only the music of the Ainur is singing like an entire world and history and just all of the richness that it contains into
Yes.
being. And then, of course, you had Melkor, who was trying to throw discordant notes in there and
hmm
challenge it, because he didn't like the creation. He didn't like that he wasn't in charge of it.
Yes. Anyway,
So anyhow, it's kind of all related.
yes.
We're bringing it all back around, wrapping it up in a nice little bow.
Speaking of beauty, by the way, there was another post I posted on the website, and it's basically I added another 5 songs to my Final Fantasy XIV playlist. Because we
Oh
all know
yeah.
because we all know that I love good music. The more I think about it, the more I realize I'm a bit of an audiophile. But I greatly enjoy great music, and Final Fantasy XIV has a phenomenal soundtrack. So I decided to add a few songs from each of its three releases. Not that I've added anything from its original release, but I mean from A Realm Reborn on, I added a few songs because there's just so much great music, and I wanna share it as best as I'm able. Part of me kind of tempted to actually make my own videos of these things because I've actually been kind of coming up with some ideas, creation, but I coming up with some ideas that I could like make my own videos of some of these pieces of music because it's just so much great music, and I encourage you to listen just because it's
Okay.
I've always
I do like the music that you play at the end of the episode.
but it's yeah. Today, in fact, I'm going to. I said on Facebook last week that I'm going to be spending the next couple of months focusing on music from Ko Ogata. He's someone who makes arrangements of various video game themes on YouTube, and he's been doing it for years. In fact, he's been doing it for many many years, and he's still doing it. And he uses traditional Irish instruments to do it. And he's made a and it's really cool too because for some of these themes it sounds so much like the original theme, like you would think it was the original theme, and it's not when you listen to the actual thing. Especially for one called Selbina. I'm gonna do that eventually, but this week I'm probably gonna do something for Final Fantasy XIV just because I did my selections, and also because Final Fantasy XIV: A Realm Reborn is about to celebrate its 5th anniversary. So
Yeah.
it'd also be fitting just to do that. Its anniversary event will be beginning next week, and yeah, I'm looking forward to that. For all of its faults, Final Fantasy XIV is easily one of my favorite games of all time. Like it is really enjoyable. Like I do feel like they have issues with trying to keep it interesting, especially in between major patches. But its story, its world building, its gameplay, they're all really great. And I like to celebrate things that are worth celebrating in that regard. So
Hmm.
anyway, we'll see what I decide to choose because there's I think I have 5 of his arrangements from Final Fantasy XIV. So we'll see what I choose tonight. I'm not sure yet. But anyway, wow, that was an episode filled to the brim with conversation.
Yeah, it got a little philosophical too.
I don't think we dropped off at any point there. And you were worried about not being prepared at the beginning, but
Well,
I don't think we lost
we
momentum.
usually at least have, a topic or two or three, and we know that we're going to talk about those things. And I had a lot of anxiety and asked you before the show, I was like, what are we talking about? How is this going to go?
But I told you
And
having that starting point was going to get us places. Just knowing
we
where we
made
were
it.
going to start.
We made it through. Were we the heroes for the journey, or did the journey make us heroes? We'll never know.
And we started with John McCain, of all people. And even then, I bet that if we talked about this for like 5 more minutes, we could probably find a way to tie John McCain into all of this.
I was gonna say every good story needs a Dark Lord.
Oh, that's terrible. The man's dying of brain cancer, for crying out loud.
Oh my gosh. Again, I don't wish that on anyone. Ugh.
A Dark Lord of Mordor has brain cancer. Wait, what? Wait, Sauron has, of all people, has brain cancer? Is Sauron even people? Um,
Ugh. Maybe we won't get this one pulled off YouTube.
maybe. I mean,
Politics and jihad bunnies.
after the jihad jokes in the middle, if this doesn't, I think we're benefiting from the fact that we're so small that the bots probably won't even detect us. It's like, oh, they mentioned jihad. They must be anti-Muslim. But,
Oh my gosh.
because that's why we would get pulled, It's because we perceived to be anti-Muslim, not because we said anything truthful or anything. No, it's just because of that perception.
Perceptions.
Anyway, we want to thank you for watching this episode of Nerd Rage. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a heck of a ride.
Hopefully, people are willing to stick around for a bit more and see where else we go with this.
Well, like I posted earlier today, we've consistently gotten above 50 views for every episode since we started up again. So,
That's not too bad because we had quite the long hiatus.
we also before this point we frequently got sub 20. Like I said, the only videos that got above 50, the only video that got above 50 was the one where we talked about The Empire Strikes Back Revisited. Um, that one's still our most viewed video at like 108 views. So, um, take that for what you will. But yeah, so we don't feel like we're doing too bad, honestly. We still have to discuss what we talked about last week in terms of like Patreon.
Yes, and we still need some feedback for whoever might be watching.
You better start hitting people on Facebook with a hammer. I mean, you better start talking to people. Hit them with hammers.
Okay.
Anyway, if you did enjoy it, of course, there are links in the description below for all of our social media pages and our website. There will be relevant links to, to the articles we discussed and any other videos that might be relevant. I don't know if there's relevant videos. I don't know. I don't even remember where this conversation went, honestly. Like
it went all over the place.
It went all over the place, and it's like I'm at the end. I'm like, wait a minute. How did we get here?
Should have taken notes.
Anyway, thank you for watching, and we will catch you next week for more shenanigans, more nerdery. And we didn't even talk about the Incredible Hulk. I just realized.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I'll just get to that next week.
But enough about John McCain.
Oh, for crying out loud! Until next week, everybody.
Bye.
Really? I mean, you do realize that the Incredible Hulk is a hero, right?
Oh my gosh.
Could not resist the low hanging fruit there.